He acted like I was invisible. But when I walked into the boardroom with the majority shareholder proxy in my hand, he finally raised his eyes, right as I unfolded the meeting agenda file. I had worked with Ethan Myers for 7 years, not for him, with him. At least that's what I told myself back then. We were supposed to be co-founders, equal minds, equal vision. That was the myth I fed myself every time he introduced me as operations, while he took credit for every pitch, every contract, every sleepless night I lived through alone. He'd smile that perfect, curated smile of his, the one that made investors trust him with money and interns blush with worship. And I'd sit 3 seats down, arranging the deck he forgot to send, fixing the typo he made in the board action notice, or watching him take a call I had scheduled on my own calendar. Then came the whisper in the hallway, the kind that changes how you walk through the office, the kind that makes you check if you're still wearing your badge, your nameplate, your title. Did you hear? They're restructuring. Ethan's bringing in someone from his old firm. They might phase out her role. Her. Me. The first time I confronted him, he didn't even flinch. "Everything evolves, Claire," he said, still typing, barely glancing up. "Let's just keep our eyes on what matters." He meant his eyes and his version of what mattered. But I knew the signals. The meeting agenda files that stopped landing in my inbox. The HR assistant who began avoiding eye contact. The calendar invites that went from team sync to leadership alignment with one less recipient. Me. At first I waited. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they just forgot. But one morning I came in and my nameplate was gone. Not replaced, not moved, just missing. As if the space I occupied had been erased from the architectural blueprint of the company I built. I stood by the glass wall of the conference room watching him joke with the new recruit, sleek, loud, younger, someone he could mold. He didn't look at me, not once, as if I was a line item already written off. I went home that night and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for my promotion. Instead, I drafted a different kind of letter. Not a resignation, not a complaint, a motion. I called Julia, my friend and attorney, and asked one question. "Can you verify my shareholder standing?" She asked for 15 minutes. It took her 12. "You hold 51% voting rights, Claire, through your deferred equity, plus the proxy from Ben when he stepped down. Ethan never updated the cap table." And just like that, the erasure reversed itself. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't post cryptic quotes on social media. I printed 3 things that night. A certified copy of the majority shareholder proxy, the original board action notice. Ethan submitted to remove 2 department leads, a new meeting agenda file with 1 added item at the bottom, item 7.4, board vote to remove acting CEO Ethan Myers. I slipped the papers into a plain folder and went to bed in silence. But sleep did not come easy. What do you wear to a silent war? She built the company with her silence. Now she was about to weaponize it. The boardroom was cold. Not physically. It had state-of-the-art climate control, but emotionally. You could feel it. That taut air of polished silence stretched between egos dressed in pressed suits and expensive cologne. I arrived early, not because I wanted to impress anyone, not anymore, but because I wanted to own the room before Ethan walked in. I placed the meeting agenda file in front of every chair. Cream folder, embossed logo, page 7 held the storm. Item 7.4. 1 line, 12 words, all legal, all fatal. I sat in the chair Ethan had occupied for years, head of the table. Then I waited. They trickled in. Emily from finance, wearing her signature monochrome in skepticism. Jordan from product, eyes darting like a caffeine hunting squirrel. And Alan, one of Ethan's oldest allies who nodded like he knew something the rest of us didn't. No one mentioned my seating position. No one dared. Instead, they opened the folders like always, page by page, numb fingers on paper until Jordan blinked. Emily leaned back. Alan's pen froze mid-flick. Then came the footsteps, the ones I had mapped out in memory. Ethan. He paused in the doorway when he saw me. Not a flicker of shock. Just a second of recalibration, like a man seeing a familiar chessboard only to realize someone swapped all the pieces overnight. "Claire," he said, smooth as ever. "You're early." And you're late, I replied, flipping open my laptop. Let's begin. He took the seat at my right, not because it was his, but because I now sat in his. The symbolism wasn't lost on him, or anyone. The meeting rolled forward like normal, routine approvals, budget allocations, empty nods, but no one truly listened. Every eye kept drifting to that one item, 7.4. When we got there, I cleared my throat. I'm invoking my rights as majority shareholder, I said. Julia's letter was ready, time-stamped, notarized. Per our bylaws, I have called for a vote on the removal of the acting CEO. Silence. The kind that vibrates. That leaves a taste in the air. Then Ethan laughed. Claire, come on, you're not serious. I turned the folder toward him. I'm deadly serious. He scanned the documents, trying to find the loophole, the exit ramp, the typo he could pounce on, but there was none. I leaned in. You should have updated the cap table when Ben left. You didn't. You thought you had time. You thought I'd stay quiet. Emily broke first. Is this legal? Julia's voice entered the room through the conference line. Yes, Claire holds 51.2% of active voting shares. Jordan dropped his pen. Ethan turned pale. For the first time in years, he had no script, no pitch deck, no control. He looked at me, really looked at me, that same face that never turned in meetings, that passed me in hallways like I was scenery, that told reporters we were just colleagues. Now it stared down the barrel of a reality. You wouldn't do this. I already did. We went around the table, one by one. Jordan. Yes. Emily. Yes. Alan hesitated but voted no. Loyalty dies last. And me? I whispered my vote. Yes. 4-1. Majority. Motion carried. The room stayed frozen. Ethan looked hollow, as if the air had betrayed him. He stood, straightened his jacket, and gave a nod I'll never forget. Half arrogance, half defeat. He walked out without a word. I didn't move. Not for a full minute. The boardroom wasn't cold anymore. He walked out like he still owned the company. He had no idea what I'd prepared next. If you've ever been underestimated in a boardroom, hit subscribe. Claire's story is just warming up. The morning after the vote, HR called. Not an email, not a Slack ping. A real call from a desk phone I hadn't heard ring in 3 years. The woman on the line, Mia, sounded careful, as if I were holding a knife. We're scheduling a transition meeting, she said, to discuss Ethan's offboarding. He didn't leave notes. Of course he didn't. He never believed in paper trails. He believed in charisma, in back channels, and you'll just figure it out, right? But now the crown sat crooked on an empty chair. I stepped into the office and noticed something strange. People weren't avoiding eye contact anymore. Some nodded. A few smiled. One intern, Tess, I think her name was, whispered, "Finally," as I walked past the kitchen. There's something eerie about a space relearning its balance, as if every hallway, every door, every login remembered who helped build it. I opened the master admin panel. Ethan's credentials had been deactivated, but the mess remained. Calendar overlaps, flagged expenses, dozens of pending vendor approvals, all frozen mid-motion. Then I found it, an unsent draft, labeled Internal CEO Vision Q3. I opened it, breath stalling. It was a deck, glossy, polished, but rotten underneath. Ethan had laid out plans to dissolve our Latin American operations, cut 60% of our remote staff, merge client service into automation, with no reskilling strategy. And then came the kicker. Leadership Redundancy Review, Phase 2. A bullet point, 2 words, my name. He'd planned to eliminate me even before the performance reviews, before his fake, "You're doing great" email, before the wine I opened. Alone, I sat back, let it sting, then let it go. I had work to do. The board action notice required a formal transition plan, so I drafted one. Not just a list of new hires or budget cuts, but a rebalancing. Reinstated the mentorship program Ethan shelved due to low ROI, signed off on promotions that had gathered dust in his inbox, scheduled a company-wide Zoom call, not a video, not a PDF, a live call, faces unfiltered, reactions real. I gave them 24 hours notice. That was all they needed. The day of the call, the waiting room filled fast. My face reflected back from the grid. 37 rectangles, each holding its breath. I started simple. I know this week was unexpected. Muted nods, glances to the side. No one dared speak. I won't sugarcoat it. The company has been running on perception, not principle. That ends today. A blink, then another. I'm not here to replace Ethan. I'm here to fix what he broke and remind you who helped build it in the first place. Behind me, the meeting agenda file sat unopened. I didn't need it this time. After the call, messages poured in. Some short, thank you. Some long, I almost quit last month. One, anonymous. I didn't think anyone would ever say it out loud. Later that night, I opened my email and found one unread message from Ethan. Subject line, "That's how you're doing it? No body, just that." I stared at it. No rage, no fear, only clarity. I didn't reply. That wasn't my language anymore. 3 days after the vote, I stepped into Ethan's former office for the first time. I didn't knock. The door, previously guarded by silence and a frosted glass nameplate, stood open now, almost timid. As if the walls themselves were waiting to be claimed, the room was spotless, too spotless. No pens, no photos, no folders, just a desk, a lamp, and a faint smell of citrus disinfectant, like someone had erased a personality. But in the bottom drawer, behind the false panel, I found it. A file labeled C. Fontaine Contingency. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, printed emails, time-stamped Slack messages, redlined contracts, half-drafted performance concerns. All about me. Ethan had compiled a dossier, fabricated, slanted, prepped for a potential HR dismissal. He had started planning my exit long before any tension had surfaced. One annotated note, if Claire challenges vote rights, trigger NDA clause, initiate discredit sequence. There it was. A contingency plan for the very thing that just happened, except he never got to pull the trigger. I closed the folder and placed it back, but not before photographing every page. Silence is power, but records are armor. Later that day, Mia from HR stopped by. She looked exhausted. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "I'm sorry, Claire. We knew parts of it, but not this." I didn't offer comfort. I simply nodded and handed her the majority shareholder proxy letter Ethan had signed back when we needed bridge funding. It was still legally binding. His signature, ironically, had saved me. We walked to the server room. Together, we audited the access logs. That's when we found something else. On the night before the vote, Ethan had exported several files to a personal device. Sensitive ones, payroll, performance reviews, internal assessments, none of which he was authorized to take. He hadn't planned to walk quietly. He had planned to burn the trail behind him. But what he didn't know was that two-factor authentication had failed. His phone hadn't been verified. The logs showed the attempt, but not the completion. The company's data remained intact. I filed the report. No theatrics, no scandal, just a quiet submission. Under security incident, unauthorized data access attempt. Let the papers speak. I'd said enough. That evening, I stayed late. The office was quiet. Most of the team had already gone remote. I walked the halls in soft heels, touching glass panels, unplugging chargers, adjusting blinds. This space had once ignored me. Now, it listened. I ended in the atrium. The founder's wall still bore our original photos. 2 silhouettes under the startup logo. No names. Just established 2016. I stood there a long while, then, with dry hands, peeled his photo from the wall. No anger, just gravity. Back at my desk, a new folder waited. Julia had sent it, marked Forward Strategy, CEO Reinforcement Plan. Inside, suggestions for public messaging, board engagement, and, most importantly, an internal reset. One line stood out. Be visible. Your silence built it. Your voice will sustain it. I closed the laptop. This time, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's company. I felt like the architect. A week after the vote, I was invited to speak at the quarterly investor call. It used to be Ethan's stage. He would show up in a tailored navy suit, hair slicked, charm at 110%. I'd sit just off camera, handing him data points, highlighting risks he'd breeze past with a laugh. This time, my name was printed on the agenda. Claire Fontaine, acting CEO update. No fanfare, no PR makeup crew. Just me, a glass of water, and the full weight of everything he left behind. 5 minutes before the call, I stood in front of the mirror in the executive restroom. Not to fix my hair, to breathe. I thought about what they might ask, about the transition, the vote, the missing files. But more than that, I wondered what they really wanted. Confidence, vision, damage control, or just reassurance that the woman who once fetched analytics was now driving the car and not crashing it. I opened the laptop and joined the call. Faces appeared one by one. People who'd wired us millions, who'd asked for updates but never cared who typed the decks. "Good morning," I said. And then I told the truth. Not the drama. Not the power games, just the state of the company, where we were bleeding, where we were rebuilding, and what it would take to earn back the trust that had quietly eroded under Ethan's curated polish. I didn't smile much. I didn't charm. I presented the numbers. I showed the new org chart. And then I did something Ethan never dared. I opened the floor. It was silent for 5 seconds. Then, "Claire, how soon can we see the revised LATAM strategy? What does leadership development look like under your plan? Can you walk us through the changes to equity allocation?" Not one question about Ethan. Not one about why I did what I did. Only what I'd do next. I had spent 7 years being ignored. Now I was being studied. Not for scandal, but for stability. I didn't flinch. After the call, I closed the lid, exhaled, and allowed myself one indulgence. I walked into the break room and took the last of the fancy coffee pods Ethan used to hoard. Mia laughed when she saw me. "You're different," she said. "It's not just the job. It's your face." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. It wasn't confidence. It was clarity. That afternoon, Alan from the board stopped by. He looked sheepish, a legal pad in one hand. "I owe you something," he said. I raised an eyebrow. I voted no. I was loyal to the person, not the position. But I see now, I was loyal to a version of the past that doesn't serve the company anymore. He handed me the pad. "Item suggestion for the next board agenda," he said. "Formalize your position. Make it permanent." I stood there in silence. For 7 years, I had waited to be invited to the table. Now the table was mine to rearrange. I didn't give Alan an answer. I didn't need to. Not yet. I opened my notebook and added a single line. Board agenda. Item 1.1. Vote to confirm Claire Fontaine as CEO. No bold, no underline, no drama, just truth in print. The next Monday, I walked into the legal review with a portfolio under my arm and a tremor in my hand I refused to show. We weren't in a courtroom. We didn't need to be. But the atmosphere inside the legal conference room felt no less formal. 2 attorneys, external counsel this time, sat across the polished oak table, their pens already uncapped. They were there to assess the legality of Ethan's past actions, and my own. No one said it, but the implication hung in the air. If we go forward with this, are we exposing the company? I placed the file between us. Everything here is time-stamped, verified, cross-referenced against internal access logs and shareholder agreements. It included the majority shareholder proxy, the unfiled board. Action notice Ethan had drafted but never submitted, where he tried to dissolve the founding agreement retroactively, Slack message logs Ethan believed were auto-deleted, and a single email dated 6 months ago. She doesn't need to know about phase 2. One of the lawyers adjusted his glasses, the other just nodded slowly. "We won't need to escalate this," one finally said. "But we do recommend that you submit this to internal compliance, not to punish, just to protect the company from any exposure." It was diplomatic code for, "You already won, now bury the knife." I agreed. Then I asked for something no one expected. "I want a statement, not for the public, for the team." They both blinked. "Internal memo?" "No, a full-page letter, signed by the board. Not about Ethan, about the company, about how we move forward." That night, I wrote the first draft myself. It didn't mention names. It didn't drag history into the spotlight, but it did name values. And it told the truth. About how silence had once been misread as weakness. About how the company's strength now lay in people who listened. Not just those who spoke the loudest. The next morning, I sent it to Alan. His reply came back 2 hours later. Added to the next board action notice, I'll co-sign it. After that, things moved quickly. The board met again, this time with no resistance. I was confirmed as permanent CEO by unanimous vote. The same hands that once passed over my name now printed it on official documents. And in the background, our systems team archived Ethan's entire directory, not out of spite, out of compliance. The man had built a shadow kingdom in plain sight. Now it belonged to no one. I found myself walking the office late again, this time stopping outside the tech bullpen. It was empty, lights dimmed, monitors asleep. But taped to the whiteboard, scrawled in marker, was a message someone had left. Claire 2024, silent, smart, savage. I laughed out loud. A real laugh. Someone had seen me, not the ghost I used to be, not the assistant, not the fixer. Me. I left it there. Back in my office, I sat down and reopened the original meeting agenda file that started all this. Item 7.4. Vote to remove acting CEO Ethan Myers. A single line had rewritten everything, and I still hadn't raised my voice once. 2 weeks after Ethan's removal, the walls began whispering again. Only this time, they were whispering about me. Not in fear, not in disdain, in curiosity. Did you hear what Claire did with the LATAM team? She reinstated parental leave for contractors. I think she actually reads the feedback reports. It was surreal. Not long ago, I was the woman people looked through in meetings. Now, I was the one they watched for cues. But visibility is a double-edged blade because with it comes the weight of expectation. The company had operated on autopilot for so long that no one knew how to handle accountability. People wanted answers. They wanted direction. And most dangerously of all, they wanted it now. The biggest shift came when I received a formal request from product and strategy. They wanted a roadmap, not just for Q4, for the next 2 years. Ethan had always refused long-term forecasting. He called it a creativity killer. But I saw through it. It was because he feared committing to any path that made him traceable. Now I had to choose a direction and publish it. I scheduled a full day off-site with leadership. Not at a hotel ballroom, at the original co-working space where we launched the company. 2 plastic desks. No central AC, coffee so bad it tasted like ambition. I told them to come with laptops and honesty. When they arrived, I didn't hand out decks. I handed out notepads. Today, I said, we build forward, not from what we were told we are, but from what we've actually become. They looked nervous, then intrigued. By lunchtime, something cracked open. People started telling the truth about missed opportunities, about Ethan's silent favoritism, about the toxic layer of performative productivity that had covered up deep cracks. One department lead said, "I've never made a decision without double guessing what he'd want." Another whispered, "I always thought I was one mistake away from disappearing." And then it hit me. They weren't loyal to Ethan. They were loyal to survival. That's what I had inherited, not just a broken structure, but a haunted one. We built a new roadmap. Together. It was messy, loud, unpolished, but it was real. We scrapped 5 legacy features Ethan had pushed for investors, but never finished. We reallocated budget to employee wellness. We even set a hard rule: no new initiatives without a people-first impact clause. And in the margins of someone's notepad, I saw this written in shaky pen: silent builders greater than loud pretenders. That one stayed with me. Back in the office, I gathered the final pieces of the new strategy doc. I titled it Reconstruction, not rebranding, not reorg, reconstruction. Because sometimes you don't start over. You salvage. You pull what's still alive from the ruins and teach it to breathe again. I shared it with the board, with the team, and finally, with the investors. Their reaction wasn't thunderous. It wasn't standing ovations. It was quiet approval, measured support, the kind that matters more than applause. That night, I passed by Ethan's old parking spot, still empty, still unclaimed. But now, instead of feeling like a ghost walking past a grave, I felt like someone planting a garden in a place where fire once lived. I didn't expect the letter from the regulator. It arrived folded, sealed, and stamped with the agency's emblem in thick navy ink. Not an email, not a CC'd compliance note. A real letter, hand-signed. Inside, a request, not an accusation, not an audit, a request for cooperation in an ongoing investigation regarding executive conduct across 3 companies, including ours. At the center of the inquiry, Ethan Myers. My fingers paused on the page, absorbing the weight between the lines. It wasn't about me, not directly, but Ethan's name was tied to contracts, to decisions, to numbers I had inherited, and if I didn't act quickly, the fire he lit could trace its smoke back to our doorstep. I called Julia. Her voice, steady as always, sliced through the panic forming in my chest. Cooperate fully, but stay strategic. You're not on trial. You're cleaning up one. We pulled records, vendor logs, email backups. The board action notice archive. The meeting agenda files from the last 2 years, including the ones Ethan had removed from the shared drive but not from the server. And then came something unexpected. A memo Ethan had never sent. Drafted, time-stamped, auto-saved. Subject line, spin-out proposal, personal venture. Inside was a blueprint. Ethan had used company resources, design assets, legal templates, even our own contractor time, to prepare a launch for a rival platform. One he intended to run behind the scenes while draining our roadmap. He wasn't just sloppy, he was treasonous. I brought it to Alan first. His face drained when he read the memo. I defended him, he whispered. You weren't alone, I said. Together, we brought it to the full board. Unanimously, they approved a statement of cooperation to the regulator, on company letterhead, signed by every current director. I added one sentence. This organization stands for transparency above legacy. Mia from HR helped initiate quiet reviews, not disciplinary, restorative. We looked at teams Ethan had touched, where silence had grown like moss in corners of creativity. We started listening again. One engineer told me, I used to build things for approval. Now I'm building for users. One designer, we always knew something was off, but no one asked. And then someone sent me an internal survey comment that made me stop mid-scroll. For the first time, I feel safe to speak even when it's not good news. The regulator responded within 72 hours. They thanked us. Our cooperation was noted and officially removed us from liability scope. Ethan, they said, had exceeded reasonable bounds of independent action. They would proceed with his review. We were clear. That night, I stayed late again. No bottle, no toast, just quiet. I walked through the office barefoot, heels abandoned under my desk, and paused at the long window by the mezzanine. The city below pulsed in rhythm, alive, unbothered, unaware, like us. Moving forward. The first time I saw the company's name on the cover of Fortech Weekly, it wasn't under Ethan's name, it was under mine. The headline wasn't flashy, no wild declarations, no disruptor labels, just 5 words. Claire Fontaine's quiet rebuild pays off. I stared at it for longer than I should have, not out of vanity, out of disbelief. Because for so long the company had been synonymous with a single voice, loud, polished, marketable. Now it was associated with something else entirely, resilience. The article was fair, measured. It didn't dramatize Ethan's departure or romanticize my rise. It focused on the data, improved retention, record client satisfaction, revenue stabilized after a dip, and the new leadership culture metrics that had doubled in 6 months. They quoted a vendor who said, Claire doesn't dominate a room, she clears it for everyone else to be heard. That one made me stop, because that's exactly what I'd been trying to do, but with visibility came invitation. Within a week, I received 3 requests, a keynote speaking slot at a global leadership summit, a spot on a panel titled Women Who Rebuilt from Within, an offer to join the advisory board of a venture capital firm. 10 months ago, no one would have spelled my name right on a badge. Now, they wanted it engraved. But here's the thing, no one tells you about recognition. It feels heavier than rejection, because now you carry not just your story, but every eye watching it. I didn't say yes to all of it. I said yes to one, the advisory board position, not for prestige, for access. Because in that room, I could do something Ethan never did, Open doors sideways, not just climb, but quietly unlock the floors beneath me for others. Meanwhile, back at the office, something small but monumental happened. We got our first unsolicited job application from a top-tier engineer. They wrote, "I've been watching your leadership style. I want to build somewhere that doesn't rely on noise." I read that line twice, then a third time. It was working. Not the press, not the panels, the change. I started a new tradition. Every Friday morning, I meet one random team member for coffee. No agenda, no pitch, just 30 minutes of conversation. Sometimes it's about work, sometimes it's about nothing. But every single time, I learn something Ethan never could from his perch. This Friday, a junior analyst told me, "The weirdest thing happened. My dad asked if you were the same Claire Fontaine he just read about." I laughed. "What did you say?" She smiled. I said, "Kind of, but the real one doesn't talk that much." After she left, I sat with that for a while. She was right. I hadn't built this by shouting. I'd built it by staying, and when the moment came, by standing. 6 months later, the last trace of Ethan was removed from the company system. Not by decree, not in bitterness, by expiration. His archived email credentials hit the end of their legal retention period. IT sent a confirmation. User, E. Myers at scheduled for permanent deletion. I stared at the screen. Then I clicked approve. No ceremony, no second thoughts. Some erasures don't scream, they breathe. That afternoon, I found myself in the old boardroom, the same one where it all shifted, where I'd once sat quietly as decisions were made around me. Now, sunlight poured through the high windows, touching everything. The polished table, the ergonomic chairs no one liked, the fern in the corner that had somehow survived 5 forgotten waterings. There was a meeting agenda file in front of each chair, but this time it wasn't mine alone. It was our final quarterly of the year. Every team lead had contributed, every voice had been heard. Page 1 read, "People first, a year in correction, not chaos." After the meeting, Jordan from product pulled me aside. "You know what my dad said last night?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow. He said, "Your CEO's boring." I laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should," Jordan grinned. "Before you, we were always bracing for impact." I nodded. Now? Now we're building again. I stepped into the elevator alone that evening. The mirrored walls reflected a woman I almost didn't recognize. Calm, composed, eyes sharper but softer. Someone who didn't chase legacy or applause. Someone who understood that power wasn't volume, it was intention. On the ground floor, the doors opened. Mia stood there, holding a small envelope. "From legal," she said, "marked confidential." I opened it after she left. Inside, a copy of the amended bylaws, one line highlighted. Claire Fontaine, CEO, confirmed unanimous. Voting rights, permanent seat, non-revocable. No loopholes, no escape clauses, no contingency plan. Final. Later that night, as the office lights dimmed, I walked one last lap around the floor, not out of nostalgia, out of respect. This place had been a battlefield, a classroom, a mirror. Now it was just mine. I passed the wall where our mission statement was etched in glass. Ethan had picked the original phrase, "Innovate loud." We had replaced it last month. Now, in clean, gold serif letters, it read, "Build quiet, lead clear." I didn't touch it. I just stood there a moment longer, and then I turned off the lights.